Welcome back to another episode of the Belt Chronicles. We are today taking a look at a very legendary belt. This is episode 19, and this is a belt I've wanted to cover for a little while now. This is the Crown Jewel belt that was the NWA World Championship for about 14 years, from 1959 to 1973. The reason for this belt being in existence was because Lou Thesz got the famous Thesz belt from 1937 onward, when he was a champion for, at the time, the AWA, but not Vern Gagne's AWA. I think this is the one out of Ohio where Rogers also kept that U.S. belt and he became the first ever WWF heavyweight belt in '63. But anyway, back to Thesz. Thesz got his famous belt in 1937, and the NWA doesn't get officially formed until 1948. And so he already owned his belt for 11 years. And when he dropped the belt to Dick Hutton, he kept his belt. And Dick Hutton didn't have a belt pretty much his entire title reign. I think they may have let him take a photo or two with Thesz's for the newspapers and stuff, so he could say he was the world champion. But Lou took it back, and when Pat O'Connor won, Pat didn't have a belt either. When Pat O'Connor beat Dick Hutton, Pat O'Connor did not have a belt. Pat O'Connor was the first one to have this belt, though. And so, we are going to start with basically Pat O'Connor's reign. And this belt was made in Mexico, the original one. It was covered in fabric. And you had 6 side plates. 4 of them look like the ones that are pictured there. Allegedly, well, I'll get to that when we get to the version 2 of this belt. But you can see that little pointy edge. So all 6 side plates look like this on the version 1. Now, we're going to get to some relief pieces. That changes with the version 2. That's why I'm bringing that up. We're going to get to the relief pieces that are on this belt. Because your grapplers, your globe, your banners, and your main plate right here that reads Lou Thesz in this photo are all relief pieces. They are all separate pieces that are attached to this main plate. So you do have relief pieces that are on there, and then also there is, like, this is all painted in from what I've read in the book, but the one jewel at the top of the crown is actually a jewel. I can't remember if it was a diamond. I'm sure it was, but yeah, the very top was a large jewel. So at the very top of the crown, atop the arches, was a large jewel, but the rest were all painted. So that takes us. And you can see it's a wider cut, right? This fabric cut is a wider cut than what you would get with the leather. And so when that change happens, the change happens in 1965. In March of 65, when Lou Thesz, I think, has his last NWA title run, he does a brief tour of Mexico. And while he's on that tour of Mexico, defending the NWA World Championship, he contacts Sabala, the guy who made the belt originally, and would later go on to also make the red strapped dome globe. He contacted Salvador Lederoth to have the belt repaired, which included Sabala replacing the fabric-covered strap with a new leather strap, cut more closely around the center plate. And you can see the difference, how much tighter the leather is to the plates. And, you know, the belt at that point was on leather with white stitching. I don't know if I have an up-close photo of the belt with white stitching, but that's a rendered image. That's not the actual belt. I want to say I passed. Yeah, there you go. You can see the stitching, and this is the belt towards the end of its life, because this is after Harley has beaten Dory Funk Jr. because Dory's name is still on it. But you can see that the jewel at the top of the crown has been snapped off, and the globe is missing. And you can also see a shadow behind the grappler, so you can see that is in fact a cast relief piece. So the strap, the new leather strap, is actually, see, there's Dory, and I think on page 150 is the one I'm looking for. The shape of the strap is a little bit odd, but I don't dislike it. So you could see that it's pointy at the end. It's not rounded. It's not square. It comes to a point. And I actually have a photo of Dory Funk Jr. with the belt. It's a color photo, and you can see 3 out of the 4 holes that feed through the clasp. And there is a photo of the buckle and clasp setup on page 59 of this book. You can see the clasp and the buckle. And you can also see what I was talking about earlier when I said that the version 1 had every side plate look like this, and I have a photo of Rogers, with it, where you can see that is the case. But when they put it on leather, Sabala, for some reason, only kept 4 of these side plates, and the 2 side plates at either end are just round circular side plates. I don't get why he did that, but that was his call. I guess he thought it looked better. Or maybe he damaged the one of the side plates on the end, taking it off the fabric, and decided just to put 2 round ones on there so it wouldn't look weird. It wouldn't have 5 out of 6 being matching, and then the one that got damaged, So there is a photo of Harley Race where you could see towards the end of the belt's life, it looked a little worse for wear. You can see how it looks sort of warped, and it looks kind of, you can see it's cracked. But what I'm talking about is, they say in the book they don't think that he adhered the leather correctly, and so it started to move. And so there's a photo I have of Harley with it over his shoulder. It's on my phone, and I'll put it up right now, where you can see it's kind of loose. It's not tight to the strap like it should be. It's come loose, and so that's why it got replaced with the Dome Globe July 20th of '73 in Houston. And so Harley went into the belt with that went into that match with the crown jewel belt, and dropped it to Jack Briscoe, which is why Briscoe's the only one who had a nameplate, because they knew beforehand they were going to drop it and have Harley drop it to Jack Briscoe. Did I say Jerry earlier? If I said Jerry, I'm sorry. I meant Jack. But yeah, and then there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. So when I went to the SICW Fan Fest, I'm standing at Justin Race's table, and I'm talking to him, and there's a guy that I don't know who we're talking about the Missouri heavyweight replica that I have and I'm showing off, and I asked Justin if they still had that belt, because Harley had it, I think, 7 times is what I read, and I said he was also the last champion, so was he allowed to keep the belt? And Justin goes, we don't have that, we don't know where it is. Well, that conversation is ongoing, and like I said, there's a gentleman seated there at the table, and I know him now, Tony Richards. Tony's sitting there at Justin's table with Justin and Justin's mom. I think it's Ivana. Anyway, he says, I heard a story about what happened to the crown jewel belt, is that Sam Mushnick had a party at his house, and the crown jewel belt was on top of Sam's mantle. And the party's over, everybody goes home, whatever, and Sam gets to looking around the next day or 2 days or whatever it was, and he looked up on his mantle and noticed the belt was gone. That's a story that Tony told me. I got no reason to doubt it, because to this day, nobody knows where that belt is. And so the people that held it, there were only 4 that held the NWA Crown Jewel belt. You had Pat O'Connor, he was the first one. Actually 5, now I'm thinking about it. 5. Pat O'Connor, Gene Kaniski, Luthez, and like I said, that's when it gets re-leathered, is when it's in the possession of Luthez in March of '65. Dory Funk Jr., and then in 73? Yeah, 73, he loses to Harley Race. And I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, there were 2 NWA World Title changes here in Kansas City, and that was one of them. I think Harley beat Dory at Memorial Hall in Kansas City, Kansas. And then later in 1981, Ric Flair would beat Dusty Rhodes for his first world championship in Memorial Hall as well. So, speaking of historical belts and older belts, we're going to stick with that for next week's episode. We're going to take a look at, I mentioned the Thez belt, and that's what we're going to take a look at. Lou Thesz's NWA heavyweight belt from, like I said, 1940. Well, he got it in 1937, and he used it up until I think he dropped it in 57 to Dick Hutton. But that's going to be next week's episode. I'll see you guys there.